multiple dots that you wouldn't otherwise join to form insights. Okay, and this is a great quote from Marcel Proust. Has anyone in here seen the gorilla video with the basketball players? Only a couple of guys? Okay, yeah, I thought about putting it in, you know. Google it, seriously, Google it, but I'll walk you through it. It's hard to believe, but you set people up, you say, I want you to count how many times, there's two teams, a team in white and a team in black, 3 or 4 people in each team. I want you to count how many times the black team pass the ball to each other. And it's really hard, so keep your eyes open and count. So while that's going on, a gorilla walks across the stage, stops, beats its chest, and then walks off. And at the end of it, you say to people, right, what sort of animal did you see? And 90% of people go, what animal? Right? And this is how the human brain works. If you are out there to observe something, that's all you'll see. All right? It's a great little video. So take a look at it. But now you know there's a gorilla in it, you'll see it. But seriously, show it to some of your colleagues at work and set them up. Now, this is really hard. Count the basketball passes, and they won't see it. Okay? Well, many of them won't see it. And so this is why observations are really, really difficult, because if we don't get good observations, forming really cool insights that really cut through, is impossible. All right? Because you go out there to collect the data that you're always going out there to collect. You need to open the mind, and that will open the opportunity for the insights. Okay? A quick little one here is just Huggies. It's interesting. The guys who made Huggies thought they thought they were making disposable nappies. Yeah, and you're thinking that's what they are, right? But apparently, when they went out and observed the way that they're used and talked to parents around how they use them, they're a clothing item. And that completely revolutionised the way that they thought and designed the Huggies. So they started coming out with patterns and designs. They're not just a nappy, all right? They're a clothing item. And until they went out, it seems obvious always in the past, but when they went out and talked to parents, they had no idea and observed the way they were using the nappies. They had no idea that that's what they were. So that changed their whole design philosophy. So validation is those extreme users, just to check in. That's where we're going to get our insights. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? That's really interesting. We can then go and check those insights, validate them with the mass market. Okay, so the mass market does play a role. Moving now from the concrete to the abstract, we want to frame opportunities. And you might have heard me say earlier, how might we? How might we is a way that design thinkers frame their challenges. And in defining the challenge, how might we is quite broad. But once we've gone and done our observations and we've got insights, we now start to basically reframe our challenge. And we start getting a little more specific. And we use how might we. Okay, so how might we? And then how might we, who's the user? So how might we help a certain user group to achieve a certain thing? This is the key. So this is the part where we start narrowing in. And design thinking is, in fact, a diverging, converging process. So we do this all the time, okay? So framing the opportunities. And once we have an opportunity that we quite like, and you can have a number of them, we're now going to brainstorm. Now, how many people in here have done brainstorming before? And how many people in here think that brainstorming creates some value? And there's a difference in the number of hands, right? Brainstorming done properly is a really useful approach, but often it's not done properly. Okay, now I'm not going to give you a lesson on brainstorming, but if you want, I'll include a slide actually around the rules for brainstorming. But brainstorming, when you've got a specific opportunity and done with the rules, I'll send you the rules in this pack, is actually really, really effective. And so for those of you, and the reason I asked the question is there's been some people come out recently saying brainstorming's overrated, brainstorming's dead, brainstorming doesn't work. It does work. It's not the only thing that works. So again, I'm not trying to say do this or else it's the only way of doing it. But brainstorming done well is really, really effective. And in the program that we run, we have a video from IDEO, and they this is the next step. And then this is the last one, and this is the if defining the challenge is important, observations is really important, insights really hard. This is the other one that people don't do. Once they've got a good idea, they're off to market. All right. What we want to do here in trying experiments is to test our ideas. And in fact, you can see what David Kelly has said here. And David went off to form the D School at Stanford. Fail early to succeed sooner. In fact, there's another one which I quite like, which is fail fast and fail often to succeed sooner. And this is all about learning through prototyping. Okay, and a simple example here could be, in fact, a real one. You would have seen last, when was it? It was only about 5-6 months ago. Elon Musk came out and said, hey, who wants to buy my new Model X cheaper version of the car? Pay me $1,000 if you'd like to. 350,000 people paid him $1,000. That's actually a type of prototyping, right? He's really got an issue now because now he has to try and find a way of making them. But you can set up a website and say, hey, here's this thing. Would you like to buy it? People go, yeah. They click on the button, and you say, well, it's in development at the moment. We'll let you know when it's coming. Actually, it's probably not in development just yet. It's a test to see how desirable is this product. That's a type of prototyping, right? So you don't actually have to build a product. You could just build the image of a product. Does that make sense to everybody? And there's many, many different ways of doing these experiments. A simple one that we talk about on the course is where someone came in and got rid of all of the polystyrene cups and put ceramic cups out with a sign saying, hey, earth-friendly ceramic cups, use these. And it was just an experiment to see if people would use them. Within 30 minutes, they were all gone and the polystyrene cups were back. And what they realised they hadn't done is talk to the facilities manager. And he made it quite clear that he was the one who was going to have to go around and pick up all the cups off the desks and put them in a dishwasher. And that's a learning. Does that make sense? It's a learning. It's not a failure. It's a learning. So even though we use the word fail in the process, really it's about failing to learn. Right? We fail to learn. And so instead of investing $1 million in an idea, invest 100 and test some of the core questions or hypotheses that you have around this idea. And do lots of tests. And I think that the classic example of doing lots of tests has to be Thomas Edison, doesn't it? They're not quite sure, but they're pretty close to 1,000 light bulbs before we got the working method. Each one was a failure, but of course each one was a lesson learned, and that's how he developed the product. So
Neil, there's a couple of questions coming through here, because often there's some misunderstanding around experimentation, isn't there? Because a couple of the questions are, yes, we'd love to experiment, but we don't have a website, so we can't test in beta. But I know IDEO's point is you can experiment with less than an hour and $20. So it becomes cardboard and masking tape and polystyrene, not necessarily infrastructure and tools and that level of investment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What you're testing is not the product so much as the concept of the product. And so there's a question in there. Hey, will people come? Will people buy? Will people? And so once you understand the question that you'd like to have an answer to, you can design an experiment cheap and nasty. And on our programs, people have just got flip chart paper and walked out on the streets, Queen Street, with a flip chart paper with a question. And stop people, hey, you know, and had conversations. So you don't have to go into major production. Interestingly enough, there's and now that I want to say it, I'm going to forget the name of it, but there is a little app that you can get where you can take a whole lot of photographs of things and you can put hotspots on it, and within 15 minutes you can actually build an app, and then you can give it to someone else to use. And then just say what was good about that, wasn't so good, and you can watch them use it. So you can actually do testing in so many different ways now, and that app is fundamentally free. And building a website, there are actually organisations now who test your ideas. All right. Now, we haven't used any, I must admit, yet, but there are organisations out there where you can say, hey, we've got this idea, and they say, yeah, you should do this, we'll do it for you, boom. And they don't charge very much. And so for a few $100s, they'll do something. And so they have access to the web, and they have pages that they can build. But don't underestimate just that duct tape and cardboard box approach to testing the idea. It's the idea you're testing, not the product itself. I hope that makes sense.
And one of the things that's also talked quite a lot about within experimentation is the use of storyboarding, like you would for a commercial, but storyboarding an experience of using a service, whether it's going in to buy a sandwich at a cafe or buying a dress online, to storyboard that like you would a commercial, to go out and test that. Does each of those steps make sense too?
Yeah, storyboarding is a fantastic idea. Pixar, when they do all of their movies, all their kids' movies, basically every scene in a Pixar movie is storyboarded. So fundamentally, you might have 120 storyboards for 120 scenes for 120 minutes of a Pixar movie, and they'll storyboard it, and they'll storyboard it, and they'll just keep regenerating the storyboards well before they even think about production.
So was Donald Trump experimenting in his interviews? But perhaps was one of the questions. We leave that one.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Sort of, you're streaming this live, so I was thinking about what I could say. But the thing about experimentation is experiment with desirability first. Answer those questions first. The viability, feasibility are all well and good, but if you haven't tested desirability, if it's not desirable, you're wasting your time. So do the testing around desirability first, right? Once we've got desire, there is a desire for this product, this service, then start doing the prototyping around feasibility and viability. How are we going for time?
10 to go.
Cool. So why design thinking? Look, I decided to throw this in. I think it's important. This equation stands for performance is equal to motivation times capability times opportunity. And this performance equation is relevant to individuals, it's relevant to teams, it's relevant to organisations, it's also relevant to countries if we're talking about economic performance. So performance is equal to motivation times capability times opportunity. There is a second slide which has got some detail to that. Design thinking is about opportunity in my opinion. Motivation and capability, sure, you've got to have the skills, but it's around creating the opportunity in your business. And this is a piece that I want to focus on. Design thinking is not something that we want to have a specialist team do in your business. It's if you're talking about being innovative, you want your whole business to be on board. And so design thinking is not a specialist skill, it should be a generic skill across your total team. All right? You want your staff out there taking photographs of interesting things. Hey, look at that, boom. There are platforms that you can use, OI Engine, Open Innovation Engine, Battery, which is spelt at the end II, Mural. These are technology platforms, digital platforms, which allow masses of people to contribute. So if you come up with a design challenge, don't keep it to yourself. Try and find a way of getting it out there and asking people, hey, what observations have you made that might be useful for us? And so people can use the power of social media through some of these platforms, get them taking photos, sending stuff in. You still have your core team who are going to manage the process and who are going to decide what cool content they're going to use. So through each step you can, for example, around observations, you can collect all the data and then you can go back to people and say, awesome, we've collected all this data, here it is, what insights does this give you? And so you can open it back up again and so you can actually take people right through the process. And there's a good example of an airline overseas who use all of their staff, as many as possible, but especially the flight attendants, to give them feedback on their menu. And this airline, the Net Promoter Score increased by 16.5 points simply by involving staff in the menu design, and they were sending back photographs of uneaten food, of eaten food, and all sorts of stuff, and they changed the whole menu and the approach to service based on the feedback that they got, and that's all they did. 16.5 Net Promoter Score points advanced, and that's quite substantial. 4,000 unique contributors to the menu. 4,000 unique contributors. Now, one of the other little equations that I like to use is ES equals Q times A. ES is effective solutions. And effective solutions are equal to the quality of the solution times the acceptance of the solution. You can actually come up with a really good quality solution in design thinking, but because you've done it in isolation, its implementation is actually quite a struggle. By involving as many people as you can in the process, you're actually going to build your quality up because you're going to get lots of different ideas, but you're also going to enhance your acceptance of the end solution considerably, right? So effective solutions are equal to quality times acceptance. So design thinking is not just a technical process, it's a human process. And so get as many people involved as possible. Quite a few organisations that we work with initially, that have these super teams, okay, locked away in a room doing this design thinking to come up with this awesome solution. But it's a lost opportunity, all right? Manage the process there, but get everyone involved. Hey, I think that's probably enough around the concept. So,
well, there are a couple of questions to exactly that point coming through, which is, and paraphrasing some of the questions, where large organisations have sent groups of people off to do design thinking training. They've come back, they're an excited group, it dissipates, shortly later they've ticked that box, but it doesn't live. So how do you get a large organisation to really embrace what design thinking is?
A couple of answers there. I mean, the first one is it starts from the top, and so if your CEO and the exec team, they need to go through the design thinking process and learn the power of what it holds, and they need to then reimagine what business could look like with design thinking as a core skill, a core capability across the business. If they're not on board, or if they're just buying into, no, that's the new fad, design thinking, let's support that, then it's not going to take off. Once they're behind it, it's around creating expectations. You've got a process here, so if someone says, hey, we're generating some really cool ideas, it's up to those same leaders and other leaders in the business to say, hey, take me through your journey. You know, how did you define the challenge? How did you then design the observation piece? What insights did you get? And take me through the learning journey rather than just give me a presentation around the solution. So when people ask around process, people will use a process. And of course, it's about if people have exposure to design thinking training, if they know how to use it, and there's a core group within their own team that are using it, and the leader creates that expectation of use, then it's more likely to happen. So rather than picking 2 people from each function and sending them away, send a whole function and see what happens to a group of people who work together every day, and put them through the training as a unit.
But it's in there that the interesting tension is, isn't it? Because I'm sure there's people in the rooms thinking, yep, and when I go back to my CEO and say I think we should fail fast and fail often, that's not going to necessarily be greeted with, that's a splendid idea, let's start. So how, in your experience, how do you move an executive team from there's this thing called design thinking to I think the exec should go and experience it?
Yeah, I think one of the most effective ways is you've got to step up and try and understand what are the current issues facing an organisation at a strategic level. So how is performance? So just using ourselves as an example, the first step of our client engagement is around understanding the purpose of an organisation. The second step then is to understand how is it performing against that purpose. And so what are the challenges, what are the roadblocks that they're facing, and then talking to them about their approach for currently addressing those particular issues, and then showing them how design thinking might be an option for addressing some of those extremely tricky, complex challenges that are facing business. That's what design thinking's major advantage is because it's a less rational process. What I mean by that is rational problem solving is what are the facts, what's our objective, what are the alternatives, let's pick the best one and execute. Design thinking is trying to find problems that you might not know about yet. And so, sure, you've got a challenge, but the actual issue that's making that a challenge might be unknown. And so, design thinking is about finding root cause or finding that root opportunity and then addressing it. It's not assuming that you know. A lot of chief executives, they're chief executives for a reason, right? They are looking for different ways of thinking to address these age-old problems, and they're looking for competitive advantage, and design thinking is a good way of getting that.
For those that are using design thinking that are in the room, is anything that you would add or you would debate in your experience getting a senior team to buy in with an organisation? Been hard, straightforward? Please.
Into an organisation that's used it, applied it.
Yeah, nice.
Somebody, talk to another business who's got benefit from it and can demonstrate how they've applied it to their business.
Yeah,
for those that are dialing in for the live simulcast, the response to that question was take the executive team to an organisation that's currently using it and get them to experiencing it firsthand. Fantastic. Please.
Well, I think when we say fail, we always think about the entrepreneur that goes broke sort of thing, but fail just might mean it didn't work, you know. It's like, it's just do it, analyse it, move on to the next, you know, marketing thing or whatever scale that is, but fail doesn't mean you have to go broke either.
Yeah, exactly right. But we want to scale that failure. Yeah. And so those small failures are around those $100. Often it's a senior person in the business, just to digress slightly, it's often a senior person in the business who has a pet option. That's where the $1 million goes, and when it fails, they can't understand how it failed. So you know, you want to take that $1 million investment and chop it up into little chunks and use that to create a learning pathway to then invest the $1 million rather than go whole hog. But yeah, that can be quite a difficult conversation with someone who's got a pet project. But again, you know, design thinking is a way of doing that. Were there any other responses from the guys?
Yeah, one of the issues with design thinking is that if you use it just as another tool, and you haven't examined the underlying issue that you're trying to solve, then it's just another tool. So one of the attractions of design thinking is this process of every time you've done a prototype or you've done something, you say, is this the problem? What is the problem we're actually trying to solve here? And what I notice in many design thinking approaches is that they never go back and say, is this really the problem we're trying to solve? And I think your example of the yellow beat box, you know, that they thought the problem was colour, but they're disciplined to say, actually, there's something else here. And design thinking is very effective in terms of actually going underneath what your current thinking is. But that's a discipline I don't actually see that often in design thinking approaches.
Yeah, and that's probably our biggest challenge, is to get people to think that design thinking is a way of doing business as opposed to, hey, let's get a design thinking team together to address an issue. And so that's, and in fact, Tim Brown, who's currently CEO at IDEO, he believes that's the next biggest challenge for design thinking. It's in danger of becoming a bit of a fad as opposed to a way of doing business.
And also that some CEOs might refer to our MPS scores are fine already. We don't actually talk about defining an opportunity as well. There may not be an immediate problem or an issue, but if you're using design thinking, it might reveal an opportunity that people didn't think was there to discover. So it's as though you're saying also, let's try design thinking to see what could be, rather than just what is right now. Because if I look at what is right now, I don't have things are fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just to play that, excuse me, that comment back again for those that are dialing in from simulcast, that when we define problems such as NPS score, that can be reasonably binary. Is it good or is it not? But by reframing problem statements in interesting ways, we can look for opportunities that might not exist on the surface.
Yeah, and this is where the observation piece is really, really important. And don't forget that when we define the problem up front, we're quite broad still. So we haven't drilled down into solving something yet. We've got a challenge, and it's quite broad. right? And so you've got to keep it broad enough, without going to extremes, broad enough that there are plenty of opportunities in there. And there'll be times where we'll run a workshop, and the initial challenge will actually break down into 5 distinct opportunities, just as a number, but 5 distinct opportunities later on in the frame opportunities piece. And they're quite different, but actually it started with the same challenge. So stay broad before narrowing in. It is actually a weakness to dive straight in. And we'll often have people come to us and say, hey, yeah, we're going to make a video. And there's a solution baked right in there, video. So, what's the purpose of the video? Why are you making a video? To support people. To support people who exactly? To support people who are doing something new. Okay, so why don't we reframe that? How might we help people who are new at something like design thinking gain more confidence or gain more exposure? So you change it, all of a sudden you've got, well, why a video? Why not blah, 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 right? So you want to keep it broad enough at the beginning. Don't narrow too quickly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting quite close to time. I just want to check if there's any more questions from the floor.
Just more a statement, I think. Some really good stuff from the floor, particularly the point around integration and going back to challenge yourself on what the problem is. I think what we see a lot, and what I see every day in marketing, is we are classic for jumping to the outcome. And for me, design thinking is a discipline around always asking, okay, that might be an outcome, but what is the problem here we're trying to solve? Because an example would be, I get a lot, we need to engage more with our customers, we should be running more events. Okay, what is the problem we're trying to solve? The event might be the outcome, but if we park that for a moment, what is the problem? What is the engagement issue? What are we actually looking for? That might lead us to an outcome of how we might better engage. And that's, I think, really key for us as marketers. We often jump to the media, the output, the solution, without going, okay, can we just go back? Can we spend some time debating, challenging, iterating around what is the real problem?
And to paraphrase that, there's a great point raised on our inclination as people/marketers to jump to auditioning answers rather than concentrating on the problem. In our experience working with design thinking, it's a great, when we work with different organisations already, you can watch people in the observation phase get really frustrated because they jump straight to insights. We're not good at saying, yes, the person was wearing a jacket with a shirt. We like to try and solve that by putting them into a box. So there's interesting tension points along this journey, isn't it, for a change of mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. We probably don't have time this morning, but just as a simple example of this, one of the exercises that we run in a program is to get people to pair up, and then person A to ask person B, how do you put a contact into a phone? And people give a verbal response. And then to follow that up with show me. And quite often the verbal response and the actual behaviour of putting the contact in the phone are totally different. And the exercise is designed to create awareness with the person asking the question that actually, if I'd answered that question, I'd done the same thing. I just need to blank my mind out and write down what's happening, not why it's happening. All right, and it's incredibly difficult discipline to do, and it does take practice. So it is a skill. Okay. So, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does bring us to time. I really hope you've enjoyed this morning. The challenge with a topic like design thinking, as was evidenced with the initial where do you sit on a continuum, it's such a vast topic. But it's such a vast topic because it's so well researched, it's so well tested, the case studies are so well substantiated. So on the form that you came in on, there is a feedback panel, and if there's any particular additional questions you would like on design thinking, we'll take those questions, we'll upload them to our social platforms. One of the principals of IDEO, a chap called Tom Kelly, who's the brother of the founder, David Kelly, wrote the most incredible book for getting into early introduction to this thinking, which is called Creative Confidence. And creative confidence is all about this notion that we are the greatest way to unlock the potential in an organisation or a country is to unlock the inherent creative potential that sits within each of us. So as a recommendation, incredibly well worth checking out. But with that, I'd like you to please join me with a token of appreciation to Neil for his time this morning. And as a wee gift of our appreciation from Spark, that's for you as a wine lover. We hope you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And in the spirit of unapologetic thanks, and it's really important I do this at the end of each of these talks, to every Spark customer that's in the room, our sincere thank you. And the reason I say that is that the only reason we've been able to put on this morning, and 163 of these beforehand, is that one Spark customer said that'd be helpful, and a second said yes, we'd come along to it. And as a consequence, we've rolled these out now through New Zealand. We've just come back from a tour doing Hamilton, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, Tauranga. We're going to continue to do these things. They say there's no such thing as a free lunch or a free talk at breakfast time in Spark Lab, and here's the small catch. We would love some. Moby's site you came in on the bottom there is a panel saying feedback. And it would be incredibly helpful for us if you take no more than 2 minutes to give us some feedback on this morning. What did you like? What could we do different? Should we be back again? And if we were back again, what sort of speakers would you like to participate in? For those that are motivated by the carrot and the stick, there's no stick, but if there's a carrot, there's a $100 Spark prize for anyone that does participate. This will be randomly drawn, and we'll also put in 3 copies of Creative Confidence that will be drawn out for people randomly, which is a token more than anything else to say we would really appreciate it. We have a couple more events left in this series of Marketing Month. We're back next week with Diane Foreman, a well-known name to a number of us in the room, and also meeting with Nick, talking about how do we best unlock the what might be phrased as the Asian wallet. So it's a sensational talk coming up. So once again, our thanks for those that have come along this morning. We hope you enjoyed it. To Nick and team with Neil back at Human Synergistics, a huge thank you, and we hope to see you again next time. Cool. Cheers.